we're gonna kind of bracket off 2 weeks here and talk about something I know every single one of us is facing, and that is stress, right? Like school started on Friday, first full week's coming right at us, that causes stress. Tennessee football is 3 weeks away. That's stress, right? For those of us that are fans, you never know. Hope abounds, hope abounds. So I want us to talk about that, and if you have your Bible with you, or if you want to pull open the app, or if you just want to sit back and relax, it's been a stressful week, it's all going to be on the screen, but we're going to nose around in a couple of verses, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and we'll get to that in just a second. According to data from the National Institute of Health, 55% of people say they face stress on a daily basis. 1 out of 3 describe that stress as paralyzing. And we stress over all kinds of things, right? Like we stress over our jobs. I think 94% of people surveyed said that their job absolutely causes stress. We stress over money. We stress over maybe family or personal health problems that can be somewhat debilitating at times. Maybe we stress over issues around personal safety. It's estimated that up to 90% of the diseases and illnesses that you and I face are somehow connected to the stress that we carry with us every single day. And you may be sitting there now going, well, I wasn't stressed till I came to church, but now I'm freaking out a little bit. Well, it's okay, it happens sometimes. What I found interesting about all this is that stress shows itself in a couple of different ways. It can show itself as anxiety and worry, or maybe that sense of irritability, and can even in extreme cases lead to anger. But it can also show itself on the other side of the extreme, with a lack of energy or a lack of motivation or an unwillingness to want to engage in daily life. It's almost like stress can either dial us up to an 11, or over time it can drain us down to 0. The point is that all of us face it. And sometimes our focus on life is, well, I've got all this stress, I know it's causing a problem in my life, so I've got to ruthlessly eliminate all the stress that I face. Got to get it out of my life completely. Stress in and of itself is not going to go away. In fact, I'm not even sure it'd be a good idea to get rid of it altogether. I mean, think about this. Some of the greatest things in life, some of the greatest blessings that you and I face in life are often preceded by stress. Like for those of us that are parents, remember when your first child was born? It's pretty stressful, wasn't it? What was even more stressful than the moment, at least at our house, was the few weeks leading up to that moment. It was about a month before our oldest was born. I was on my way to church, and when I started to leave the house, Beth was like, pleading with me, you got to get this kid out of me. And she was like, you got to do something, because you got to get this kid out of me. And I was like, honey, I don't really have any control over that. I don't really know what I can do today to help you. And she wasn't interested in that. What she was expressing to me was the stress of the moment. Think about those who've recently graduated or gotten a degree or accomplished something academically. I mean, that was a blessing. But it also, they had to do the work, right? Had to meet the deadlines, had to prepare for the tests, had to write the papers, all the late nights trying to get things done. That stress was necessary to get them to that moment. If you've ever done a home renovation and you're still married, good for you. Oh, think about all the people in pursuit of a six-pack abs, right? Like the ultimate goal, six-pack. Got to get the six-pack. To get there, you got to watch what you eat. You got to work out like crazy. You got to try to balance the fitness goals in your life. You got to put your body through a tremendous amount of stress to get to that physical goal, a six-pack of abs. I gave up on that decades ago. I've told y'all before, I just went with an ab, right? Kind of a little pony keg hanging out. This is much easier to maintain than that six-pack of abs. You see, my point is that incredible stress often precedes incredible blessing. Longevity studies are showing that if you want to live longer and better, the way you do that is by continuing to expose both your mind and your body to stress. In other words, stress can be a gift. Stress is how things grow. Tension and pressure can be how things are formed and developed and shaped. And I would argue that stress itself can be a huge factor in your ability and my ability to level up in our relationship with God. It is totally unrealistic to think that we're going to eliminate stress, and it probably wouldn't even be healthy if we could. And so the question that we have to wrestle with is not how do you eliminate the stress, but how do you learn to manage it, because we face it every single day. I think the sweet spot in all of this can be found in two fundamental statements, incredibly simple. One, do what we can do, and two, trust God to do what only He can do. Do what we can do, trust God to do what only He can do. Jesus tells us, right? Stress is coming. If you're at ease in Zion right now, take these words to heed. Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. That's good news. Because what it means is that you and I will face difficult and hard stuff. We'll undergo a tremendous amount of pressure being placed on our shoulders by life, but we don't have to freak out when that happens, because it happens to every single human being. Jesus is saying in the midst of that, know that I'm going to be there to help you. I'll walk with you, and it'll be me that empowers you in your daily life. In this world you'll have trouble, but don't be afraid, because I've already overcome it. I want to look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Paul writes about this incredibly stressful time in his life. So the Bible talks about stress? Yes, the Bible talks about stress. We're going to pick it up in verse 8. Here it is. Paul writes, we think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and we thought we would never live through it. So here's proof. Anybody tells you that God will not give you more than you can handle has not read this verse. They just haven't. What does Paul say? We were crushed and overwhelmed, there's the word, beyond our ability to endure. In fact, we thought we were not going to live through it. See, when people say God will never give you more than you can handle, they're actually misquoting what Paul actually said. Paul said that God will not tempt us beyond our ability to handle it, that God will always give us a way out. But God, he doesn't say that God won't challenge us. In fact, you're going to love this. As a person of faith, God will often allow things into our lives that will prove to be more than you and I can handle. Well, why does God do that? Simple. God does it knowing that it's going to cause us to rely on Him on a whole new level. If everything in life we faced we could handle on our own, then you and I would have no need for God. And yet it is hardwired into our DNA that at some point every human being must come to the end of themselves. And when you come to the end of yourself, the question becomes, now what? Like, what's out there? What can I plug into? Who's bigger than I am? It's part of the way that God operates. Here's Paul, the guy who wrote the majority of the New Testament. Like, you will not find a better leader than the Apostle Paul. And Paul is like, look, this right here, like what we went through in Asia, that was beyond our ability to endure. And Paul had endured a lot. Like, he had been stoned. He had been shipwrecked. He was run out of different towns simply for carrying the message of Jesus. He was whipped and beaten. He faced legal troubles, some of which caused him to end up doing time in prison. And all of that, he was doing it for the sake of Jesus. And even after all of that, Paul is like, yo, this stuff in Asia, this was like a whole nother level, man. So what do you do when you're stressed beyond your ability to endure? Do what you can. Again, Paul writes, we were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and even thought that we would never live through it. In fact, we expected to die. But as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely on God who raises the dead. Paul says we learned. If you and I are open to it, we're gonna be in a process of learning every single day for the rest of our lives. Like, none of us have it figured out. No one on social media has it figured out. Everybody's trying to live their best life. That's not real life. Paul, who had more spiritual maturity in his little finger than yours truly is ever gonna have, still came to a place where he had to learn at a whole new level how to rely on God. And so when it comes to stress, one of the things that has been helpful for me is to think about these things called boundaries that are in my life. The whole idea of boundaries got rolled out and popularized by a book that was written by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. If you've never seen it, I would tell you, please buy it right now while you're listening to me. We offer a class on boundaries from time to time, either through recovery or on Tuesday nights. If you're struggling with boundaries, that's a good place to land. But let me kind of frame this up. I'm gonna save you 6 weeks just by giving you a little synopsis of what boundaries look like. We got a graphic for you here. Check out this square. This is what Cloud calls your property. Represents your heart, your mind, and your soul. And your property are your feelings. They're your dreams, they're my energy, they're our values, they're our choices. This is your life. And notice it's surrounded by walls right there, right? These are boundaries that contain everything that we hold true and valuable to ourselves. The other squares represent other people's lives. Now, the whole thing about boundaries is to realize that you are responsible for your heart, your mind, and your soul. I am responsible for my heart, my mind, and my soul. And you and I are responsible for what we allow into our lives. And what happens is, sometimes we lower these boundaries so much that we start taking in everybody else's problems. And we start taking on everybody else's challenge. We allow drama from other people to come into our lives. And it begins to drain us of all of our energy and all of our strength. Some of y'all are like, yeah, now I know what you're talking about. What I am still learning in my own life is that often when I am the most stressed, if I will stop long enough and do a little self-reflection, I'll realize I've gotten lazy about my boundaries. And listen, it's a challenge, right? We're in church. I know. Jesus told us that when you're willing to lose your life, that's the moment you'll find it. There's this legit challenge all throughout Scripture that those of us that are following in the footsteps of Jesus, our primary calling is not to build our kingdom, is to help up there become a reality down here, and that the key to life is learning to serve others. Like, I get it. We're supposed to use our time, our talent, and our resources to both glorify God and to impact those around us. Like, that is a huge part of what we are called to do. But I think it is not unspiritual to put boundaries up in your life that will allow you to actually go and do those things that God is calling you to do. Because without them, here's what's gonna happen. If you and I lower our boundaries and we start taking on everybody's problems, if we start running around always saying yes to everything, we will be really effective for a very short time. But over the long haul, we're gonna end up burning out. I see it all the time, where people cannot say no to anything. And if you can see, there's a little gate at the bottom of that slide. That means that you control and are ridiculously responsible, and so am I, for what we allow into our lives. Not somebody else, you, me. And again, I wanna serve others, I wanna make a difference, I wanna honor God, but that gate, what it does is it allows me to say my best yes. Notice the words yes and no. Those are two very powerful words. Most of us, we understand yes, but we have a problem saying no because we feel guilty or we feel responsible. We gotta do everything that we think we're supposed to do. And what will happen is if you go around saying yes to everything, you're gonna end up neglecting the most important things. Because if you don't have good boundaries, you know who you're gonna neglect? You're gonna neglect your spouse. If you don't have good boundaries and you're constantly saying yes, and you're jumping from one thing to the next, you're gonna end up ignoring your kids. That's not the way you and I were designed. In fact, I would argue those two things, if they're in your life, that is your greatest priority. more than anything else that you do in your life. See, that gate allows me to say yes to the things that God's actually called me to do. That gate is what allows me to say yes to how I'm wired up. It allows us to leverage our gifts. Here's the absolute truth. I honestly want to serve other people, but I cannot fix their problems. I want to help others, but I cannot be responsible for their actions. If I'm responsible for their actions such that it lessens the consequences for them, that's not service, that's actually enabling. Here's the truth. You and I cannot change another person. We cannot fix another person. We cannot heal another person. Only Jesus can do that. What we can do is we can love them and we can serve them. We can come alongside them and encourage them, but we cannot take on their burden. That is a job only left to God. Because there's only so much time in a day, right? It is true. Someone once said that not one human being can do everything, but every human being can do something. Walking around with the weight of the world on your shoulders, trying to fix every problem you see out there for the long haul is not going to make a difference. But if you and I will take our next step, find something to sink our roots into, that's where life begins to blossom. And I think it is spiritual, and it is mature, and it is okay to look at the boundaries in our lives. And so this week, maybe the challenge is to actually sit down and ask, where have I overcommitted? It's okay to wipe your calendar clean of some stuff. Maybe there's some toxic people that you've allowed into your life and they're draining the ever-loving life out of you. It is okay to go to them and say to them, look, I love you, but no more. I am not walking down that path with you. As my dad taught me, you're packing your own parachute. And when you jump out, its ability to stop the free fall is on you. I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna walk beside you. I'm gonna encourage you. But this toxic thing we got going on, it's time to say goodbye. That would be life-giving for some of us, man. Maybe you're part of a conversation and that conversation just never ends. Same thing over and over and over. It's okay to say to that person, look, I am not gonna talk about this anymore. See? Do what you can do. Well, Stephen, that doesn't sound Christian. Of course it is. Come on, y'all. It's about being responsible. It's about using the gifts God's given us. It's about accountability for one another. I would think it's unchristian to keep walking along and being trapped in some toxic, ugly thing. Get free from it. Because that's the moment you start to experience life. Do what you can. Here's the second thought. Trust God with the rest. Yeah, that's great. Trust God with the rest. Yeah, I get that, Stephen. As I read through Paul's letters, I get the sense that Paul has the same mentality that a lot of us have. It's that old saying, if you want something done right, do it yourself, right? Paul did a lot of stuff himself, and he was enjoying amazing results on his missionary journey to Asia. You can read about it in Acts chapter 19. In just 2 years, they saw all kinds of life change. He was performing miracles all over the place. There was one time a handkerchief that Paul touched was being used to actually heal other people. Like, it's nuts. Amazing things were happening relationally, emotionally, and spiritually. God was moving and working all over the place. And you would think if you're working in that kind of God's blessing, then there'd be no stress, right? Au contraire. See, sometimes in the blessing of God, you're facing unbelievable stress. And for Paul, when the ministry was doing great, personally, his stress was going through the roof. Now, something happened eventually. Theologians aren't really sure what happened, mainly because there's so many possibilities, right? Like, it might have been the time an entire city turned to a violent mob and called for Paul's head. That would cause a little stress to come up if literally everyone in the town was trying to kill you. It could have been the religious zealots, right, who were not upset because he was talking about Jesus. They were actually jealous because Jesus is so contagious and so interesting, and this idea of resurrection and new life, of God's kingdom becoming a reality. When Paul would talk about it, it would draw people to them. They could not stand it because it took their power away. And so there were lawsuits and judgments, and sometimes he even had to spend time in jail. Some theologians think that along the way in Asia, Paul had to deal with some kind of human illness, right, that kind of stopped him in his tracks and prevented him from doing what he wanted to do. But the end result was Paul became so stressed, we read it a few minutes ago. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. And we thought we would never live through it. In fact, we expected to die. N.T. Wright, who's a world-renowned expert on Paul, believes that that's the moment that Paul had some sort of a nervous breakdown. That between his letter to the letter of 1 Corinthians to the letter of 2 Corinthians, it finally became all too much for him. And Paul carried a lot, again, beaten with an inch of his life, shipwrecked, legal troubles, everybody coming at him, constant threat of death threats. And he carried that stress with him year after year after year. But all of us are human beings. So no matter how much faith you got, sometimes you come to the end of yourself. It's like Paul says, we were crushed and overwhelmed, way beyond our ability to endure it. And maybe you're there right now. And you're like, man, these health challenges, they're too much. Or these personal challenges I'm facing is too much. What's going on in my family, the financial pressure I'm under, it's like I work as hard as I possibly can. I got more bills than I got paycheck, and I'm not really sure what's gonna happen in the future. It's just too much. What do you do then? What do you do if right now, where you're sitting or where you're listening, the weight on your shoulders is so heavy, you literally feel like you're just stopped in your tracks? Well, Paul gives us the answer, 2 Corinthians 1 verse 10. So they thought they were gonna die, and he writes, but as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and we learned to rely on God who raises the dead. And he did rescue us from mortal danger, and he will rescue us again. We have placed our confidence in him, and he will continue to rescue us. See, Paul learned at a whole new level how to place his confidence in God. Nobody wants stress, but that is the gift that stress can bring into your life. We got to trust God with the rest. I've got a friend who went to Israel a couple of weeks before October 7th, the attack of October 7th. And I've known a lot of people that have gone to the Holy Land on a lot of different trips over the years, and I've always made a commitment, the second they build a road, I'm gonna drive and see the Holy Land, right? Because I ain't gonna fly. So he goes, and because of the timing of the whole thing, he lives in another part of the country. I wanted to connect with him because I wanted to hear his experience, right? Because everybody that goes to Holy Land comes back, and they've all got, what it was that was so impactful. And I thought he probably had his list too. He's a pastor just like I am. I thought, well, he got to walk where Jesus walked, or he was there at the place they think he was crucified, or maybe he got to see some of the, where all the stories kind of unfolded in that area. When I asked him what was most impressive about it, it kind of surprised me. He goes, out of that entire experience, the one thing that just absolutely blew my mind was the hour I got to spend at the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. The foundation stones of the Wailing Wall are believed to have existed when Jesus was alive, and they were the foundation stones of the temple before it got destroyed. And it's kind of the coming together of three world religions, right? You got Christianity, Judaism, the Muslim faith, they all come together, and every day there are thousands of people that gather at the Wailing Wall, no matter what's going on in the city or the region, and they offer prayers. And so he was saying, spending time in prayer at this wall blew me away. I was like, well, you could have done that here, man. You didn't have to have that plane flight. What was it about praying at the wall? And here's what he said. He said, I had two overwhelming feelings. First, I felt incredibly small. So when you're standing there with thousands of other people, and you're all praying, and you realize that the stones at the bottom of that wall predated Jesus himself. And the idea that maybe Jesus and his disciples walked by that wall and put their hand on the wall on their way in. He was like, I'm standing there and I'm realizing the magnitude of God, and I'm like, these problems that I brought with me all the way over to the other side of the world, it just almost seems ridiculous to allow my life to be filled with that much worry. I was like, okay, I get that, that's cool. He said the second thing he walked away with was a sense of peace that for the first time in his life, listen, that first time in his life, was not anchored in himself. He realized it was anchored in who God was. He said it really brought new perspective on all the times where the Bible says the Lord is. It's interesting, you ought to look it up. The Lord is. Bible uses that a lot. It's God's people's way of trying to convey the magnitude and the grandiosity and the majesty of God. So the Bible's just full of these statements. The Lord is. They're declarative statements. Here's who God is. And I thought, as we're dealing with stress here in Knoxville, as we go back into the week, it'd be good if we remind ourselves just how giant God is. And so I wrote down this week a few of the Lord is statements that I would now offer to you. The Bible says, the Lord is my strength and my song. He has given me victory. The Lord is my rock and my savior, in whom I find protection. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I be afraid? The Lord is my fortress, keeping me from danger. The Lord is my strength. The Lord is my rock. The Lord is the power that saves me. The Lord is slow to anger, and he's filled with unfailing love. He's forgiving of every kind of sin. The Lord is my helper. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. The Lord rescues those whose spirits are crushed. The Lord is a friend to those who fear him. The Lord is God of heaven and earth. The Lord is glorious, strong, and rooted in majesty. The Lord is the everlasting God. He never grows weak or weary. The Lord is king forever and ever, and the Lord is coming back soon. That, friends, is the magnitude of the God we serve. Not weak, not small, not uninterested, fully engaged, abounding in strength, creator of the heavens and the earth, brought the sun up in the sky, and by his grace, he'll allow the moon to rise tonight, causes your lungs to draw air into your body. And if that is who God is, who's madly head over heels in love with us, then why in the world would we allow something like stress to wreak havoc on our souls? Use it, leverage it, allow God to mold you and shape you into who you were created to be, and then roll up your sleeves and do it again tomorrow. And if God gives you the next day, do it the next day. Let us come together to change the world. But the only way you and I can do that is some of this stuff we got to let go, right? We're going to do what only we can do, but then we're going to allow God to do what only God can do. So what is that thing you've been hanging on to so tight? It's keeping you awake at night, that's causing your heart to beat fast, that weighs heavy on your shoulders. Here's the challenge. Just take your fist, you can do it right now, and open your hand. I'm not asking you to give me anything, but just open your hand. That's the approach for the next 7 days. To wake up every morning with open hands. To just say, God, look, I'm gonna do what I can do. I'm gonna do what you gifted me to do, but I'm gonna let you do what only you can do. And so God, when stress starts to creep into my life, I need you to remind me that I've opened my hand, that I've said in front of you and all of creation that at least today I'm gonna do my best to let it go, and then just let it go. And you do that same thing tomorrow, and you do it the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. And then we're gonna gather together next week, and we're gonna get part 2 of how to handle stress. And I believe that for some of us, that's gonna be a step toward freedom. Of just saying, look, I'm gonna let it go. Let go and let God, right? Some of us heard that our entire life. You can do this if you want to. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.